Welcome to another reading of The World Don't Know This Jesus. This is written by Samuel Harris, and I have permission from the family, the Goff family, to these videos. It has been an honor and a pleasure. I'm almost done. Today we're going to be on chapter 19 of 21 chapters. So chapter 19. After Larry finished telling Betty the entire story and the promise he had made to the chief concerning his brother, she knew that Larry would be faithful to keep that promise, if at all possible. She was also determined that he would not leave her and the kids behind this time. Larry connected with Brother Cadell once again, and after hearing the whole story, he was eager to help get the supplies needed for the return trip to the Chocos. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct or not, so if anybody knows the correct pronunciation, I apologize. It is spelled Chocos. The next few days was spent gathering supplies and equipment. Larry now knew a great deal more about what was needed in the jungle. One of the things was a hand-sharpened machete. Another thing Larry wanted a lot of was Kool-Aid, which he knew the Choco children would love. Larry was able to tell Brother Cadell's church in the Canal Zone about all that had happened, and everyone was excited and anxious to help. Brother Cadell agreed to take the family back to the village Betty had stayed in, and then look after the truck while they were away. When they arrived at the river, Larry and the entire family unloaded with all of their supplies. Brother Cadell then asked Larry where the boat was that would be taking them back up the river. Larry tried to explain to him that the Lord would provide. This turned into a fairly strong disagreement. Brother Cadell tried to reason with Larry, saying, yes, the Lord can meet our needs, but he expects us to plan and use our own resources. This is not just you. Your family is part of this now. As the discussion went back and forth, Larry finally told his friend, you're going to have to leave now. Brother Cadell asked him what he meant, and Larry told him that the Lord would provide a boat, but not while he was there. Larry told him that the kind of faith that was needed here, he just didn't have. This was quite an insult to this precious brother, but he realized Larry wasn't going to budge, and he accused him of not using common sense and not being organized as he drove off in a huff. Within 30 minutes, a motorized flat-bottom boat ran up on the bank right where the Goffs were stationed next to the river. The driver then told them, get in the boat. Larry could see that the man driving the boat had been drinking, but he felt that under the circumstances, this had to be the Lord's provision for them. Very soon, they were headed back up the river with a driver who was intent on demonstrating his boat driving skills to these Americans. As he clutched a bottle of whiskey with one hand, he steered the crude, homemade boat from the back with the other. Betty huddled in the bottom of the boat with the children, terrified with where they were and what was happening. This would be a boat ride they would never forget. It would have been dangerous under any conditions, but with the driver as drunk as he was, it was terrifying. To make matters worse, the river was full of floating, tumbling trees that had been freshly cut. Once again, they were heading upstream on a swollen, fast-flowing river in the middle of a tropical jungle. Rain was also pelting them as they tried to crouch low in the boat. What was amazing was the way the driver was able to avoid the logs, sometimes coming within inches of being taken out. These were trees that had been cut upstream by loggers and were huge and still had most of their limbs and branches. With the rain, the now quite intoxicated driver and large trees somersaulting around them one after the other, Larry and Betty could do nothing but pray and hold tight to the kids and each other. There was no way to stop and no place to stop, so they pressed on. They were soaking wet, so if they needed to pee, they just had to go in their clothes. This went on for hour after hour and into the night. The next morning, it had finally stopped raining, and Betty demanded that Larry make the man stop the boat so they could get out. The entire crew, including the driver, got out on the bank. Very soon, they were all being eaten alive by mosquitoes. There was nothing but thick jungle around them, so with no other option, they got back in the boat with their crazy drunk driver and resumed this insane ride upriver. That day, the driver finished off his second bottle of whiskey and finally began to sober up. The booze had given the man a type of false courage that soon began to wear off. The man began to look around and ask the question, "Where are we?" He realized very quickly that they were in Choco territory, and as soon as he could, pulled the boat to the bank and ordered his passengers out. "There are bad people here that will kill you. This is as far as I go," he told them. "So this is as far as you go." Unloading themselves and their gear, they watched the boat turn and head downstream. Relieved to be out of the boat, they now faced the uncertainty of what to do next. As they prayed, they thanked God for his provision of getting them there, as crazy as it was. They also asked for divine guidance, and it soon came, but in quite an unusual way. As they stood on the bank of the river, a small black and white terrier dog suddenly came out of the jungle and ran toward them. The little dog ran straight at Baleen, jumped up, and bit her on the face. This was a fairly bad bite that started to bleed profusely. In fact, the bite was so deep that she still has a scar next to her eye nearly 50 years later. Larry took his little girl in his arms and went down to the river to wash away the blood and try and soothe the frightened child. As he looked back toward the jungle, he saw two brown faces staring out of the vines at them. Larry had picked up a few Choco words and called out to them, "Maida," which meant hello. Two young Choco women then came out of the jungle toward them. One of the women swatted the dog with a stick, and the other scooped up the little red-headed Baleen. These Choco women had probably never seen a red-haired child, and they were totally taken with the beautiful little girl. Without a word, the women took off into the jungle with Baleen and with the dog leading the way. Very close on their heels was a red-headed mother who wasn't about to let these women make off with her baby. Larry grabbed what he could and instructed Valerie and Victor to follow. Soon the entire Goff family was in tow, trying to keep pace with the Choco women. They quickly came to a clearing full of huts, which Larry recognized as the Choco village. The women made their way through all the huts and straight to where a regal-looking tall man stood looking at them. The woman handed Baleen to the man and turned, looking triumphantly at the Goffs. As she stood pointing at the man now holding Baleen, she said this name, Piranio. The impact of what had just happened hit Larry like a Mack truck. The entire series of events unfolded and played out in his mind like a movie. The improbability of a drunk man with a boat picking them up, being able to get them upriver in a torrential downpour, avoiding the huge trees, totally intoxicated, and then depositing them on the banks of the river at the very spot that some women for Piranio's tribe would find them and lead them directly to the man he had promised to find and tell about Jesus. Through it all, the Lord had them right in the center of his will. And again, that's the safest place in all the universe. Larry introduced himself to Piranio in Spanish and quickly told him that he came with greetings from his brother. Trying to take it all in, Piranio invited Larry into a new hut that he was in the process of moving into. Larry could see the older hut and the bows and arrows and other belongings that were being moved to the new hut. After talking for a while, Piranio invited Larry and his family to stay in the old hut. They learned later that it was a miracle the old hut had not already been burned. The Chocos believed very strongly that evil spirits would inhabit a house as soon as it was vacated. These huts are elevated from the ground and serve well to protect from all the creatures that crawl on the jungle floor. When the heavy rains come, They also stay out of the streams of water that immediately form. During this time, Larry would learn the process required to properly build a jungle house, which would come in very handy in years to come. So the Lord had provided once again. Not only had he led Larry and family directly to Piranio, he had also provided them a place to live. This tribe of Chocos was very receptive to these outsiders because of the news that was brought from their chief's brother. Larry once again was able to sit around the campfire and tell the tribal elders about the message from the great sky god. As he related the story of the iguana, they knew the legend and that this man had been sent to Piranio's brother and had led him to them also. Larry had much to teach and much to learn. The big difference in this trip and the last one was that he now had his family with him. There was no time constraints on him now. He and Betty would have all the time needed to develop a relationship with the people of this tribe whom God had miraculously delivered them to. That ends the chapter 19. I don't know about you, but that's just truly amazing. Truly amazing from beginning to end. How trusting God led them exactly where they needed to be against all odds. Many people would have different things to say, and they'd probably be right in stuff that they would think or say. But in the end, it doesn't matter what they would say because Larry knew exactly who he needed to listen to and what he needed to do, even if it didn't make any earthly sense. I take and I learned from this to just trust God no matter what it looks like. I have learned throughout my 14 years of walking with the Lord that it is the safest place to be. And no matter whether I agree with what he's doing, understand it completely or not, he's not going to let me down. He's not going to fail me. If I just trust him, I'll see the results. And I may not understand everything, but he's taught me that it's not about my feelings. It's not about what I think, what I like, what I want, what I agree with, what I understand. It's about him. That's what faith is. Faith is blind. Walk by faith and not by sight. Faith is blind. And when we have blind faith and we choose to walk with the Lord, God gives us amazing testimonies, amazing stories. And it's not just stories. It's not just something to say, oh, God used me to do this. No, it's to share. Because look what Larry's doing here in these stories, in these testimonies. He's leading people to Christ. He's reaching people in the deepest, darkest places that others are afraid to go. And that's not for everybody. Not everybody has that kind of faith. Not everybody wants to subject themselves to their families to danger like that. Not everybody wants to trust God on that level. Not everybody knows how to trust God on that level. But we know that it is possible. And what God does for one, he'll do for another. That other is you and that other is me. So let's trust God when he tells us to do something. Let's just follow what he says to do. Because it's our stories for his glory. Blessings to you.